Anyway, I'm super nervous.
Why are you nervous?
How funny is this, by the way? Because you know how I love starting these, like, just chatting.
I've been wanting to ask this. I was thinking of questions to ask you. How did you decide that you wanted to become a podcaster? Because I remember the first time I met you, you said something that was related to you wanting to become a podcaster. I think you said you wanted to be the female Joe Rogan. But how did you come up with the idea? What led you to that?
What? Did I actually say that when we first met?
Yeah. We're watching the tennis at a pub.
Wow. And I said that back then.
Yeah. So that's like 3.5 years ago. 3 years ago.
Oh, yeah. Wait, are you asking me questions that you're genuinely interested in?
Yeah, absolutely. I've never asked you.
But I feel like I must have talked about it so much.
I think you've said like you wanted to help people understand the world around them, but I don't know, I guess just for my benefit and for the rest of the listeners' benefit. When did you make the call? I know when you made the call. I know the background of, well, you can talk about that. Like, what was the background? Like, when did you kind of make such a big change in where you wanted to go with your career and with your work, with your life's work? And then what made you decide podcast?
Yeah, well, I don't think it was about that. I think it was something when I was at Cambridge. I just noticed, like, I think the breakdown in conversation, I don't know, there are a few things. Like, I became very interested in the world because I think in banking, like when you're just working 100 hours a week, you're like, you don't know much about the world because you're just in the office like all the time, right? You're not even doing stuff on a weeknight that you would, like you're just seeing an inside of an office. So then when I was at Cambridge, I was like, oh my God, like meeting all kinds of people was just like so interesting and having conversations. And then I think realizing like the breakdown, because there are people with like strong opinions. I don't know if you found that when you were there, but I think I was quite sensitive to like, okay, people are like thinking in a certain way, but then maybe that it wasn't that open to be able to have conversations and like talk through things. So that was one part of it. And then the other part was, and that's how I ended up going to the Cambridge Union a lot. Or I was kind of became interested in like political values. I was like, oh, if speech is important, being able to speak freely and discuss ideas freely, like where do I go to find that and people who value that? But then I think I was just having such interesting conversations with people who were telling me things. I don't know, maybe I'd noticed that for a long time, that people would tell me things about themselves, like people who I had just met, and they would, like some really like they would say stuff and be like, I haven't talked about this to anyone, or like, oh, like, can't believe we're having this conversation that's like so in depth and we just started chatting. And so I was like, oh, this is really cool. Like, what if I made a podcast? I don't know. It was just like a thought. It was like, what if I made a podcast? Yeah. And then I said that to my boyfriend at the time, and he was like, that's a terrible idea. He was like, why would you do that? Like, I was so excited, and he was like, why would you do that? And I don't know, it was just this idea that it was like, I feel like that's something I have to do. It's so hard to remember, but it wasn't I don't know, there are a few things going on. And then it was like, because I was still like traumatized by work and all that stuff, I think I was looking for like an escape as well. So it was kind of, but you know, the first idea was like, oh, I'll make a YouTube channel and talk about books
Yeah.
or something.
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh, I'm having a gap year. I don't know. I was just all over the place. But I feel like those like practice runs, like what I really wanted to do was interview people and have these conversations that I was already having and record them. But we did our podcast on cancel culture, that first thing, which I think was like, okay, I want to experiment, but I don't know how to do a podcast, so let's like do a trial one. Because you had made a podcast before, and I was like, what? Like, whoa, that's crazy. Because it's so. I was like, oh my God, like, how do you do it? Because, you know, when you don't know how to do something, it's like, how does that even exist?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then so I was like, cool, let's do this. And then I was making YouTube videos, but it was like, I really wasn't doing what I wanted to do because I was too scared. Like, I was so scared to ask people to come on the podcast. That was my biggest thing. It was like rejection. It was like, everyone will just say no. Like, I was too scared to even ask my dad or whoever.
And how does it, I mean, you must have, because this is your 100th episode now, isn't it? That we're recording.
No, this is 98 because I messed up the backlog and I don't have an episode for this week. I'm about to go skiing. And then when I come back, I have like I'm recording 3 in a row. So anyway, this is being posted in like 2 days.
But you must have have you gotten past the fear of asking people to appear on an episode? Because 98 that's a pretty good effort in like a year. It's taking you like a year to get there.
18 months, yeah.
18 months, yeah.
Yeah, it was when we were in India, when we were hiking in the Himalayas, and I was about to start it, or I started straight after that. Yeah, I've gotten over that fear because, okay, so now it's different. So, because it's kind of it has to be the right, I don't know, it's kind of more of an intuitive thing. Like, it has to be the right time, right place, right time kind of thing for someone to come on, because it is quite vulnerable. So it's like to talk about your childhood, like how you grew up, your story, like you want to be feeling confident in your life. Like if you're in a spot when you feel a bit lost, or you're like in between jobs, or you're like not quite sure what you're doing, or, you know, stuff's going bad, you just went through a breakup, whatever, it's probably not the best time to like come and do something publicly and talk quite vulnerably about like adversity and whatever, right? So it's like nothing to do. So I understand like it has to be the right time for someone to come on. And then I also understand that some people are private, like they never want to do it. Some people, I realize, it's like they've never spoken about their childhood, and then it's this big thing that they think about because they're like, I've wanted to talk about this for so long, but it's really difficult for them because, you know, there's like complicated stuff in their family, and then they're like, actually, I feel like this is my moment that I want to talk about it. But, you know, it might take them a few months. So it's like, yeah, it's like no pressure. Like it's just like come whenever. It's like an open invitation kind of thing.
Yeah.
But then for other people, other people are just private. It's like, no. A lot of people are very humble, and they're like, why would anyone be interested in me? Like, especially people who are like quite successful will say that, which I think is like a really good sign.
Yeah.
Rather than like, oh yeah, everyone loves me, like obviously. But I still get intimidated in asking. So like I asked this woman who is coming on the podcast, I heard her speak and she did this amazing talk, and I was like, oh my God, this person is so impressive and her ideas are amazing. And I would love to ask her. And it was like it was kind of okay because I was just like saying how much I enjoyed her talk and just mentioned I had a podcast and would love to speak to her.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it's just like a no pressure thing. And he said yes. And she said, yes, I love these things. I was just on one and it had 7 million views. Like, how crazy a podcast. Like, I love doing them. And then I didn't contact her. It took me 6 months to contact her because I was so in my head of like, oh my God, she's this huge person who gets like, she's been on these massive platforms and like mine won't have 7 million views and so I'm not good enough. Like I'll get in my head a lot about stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
Which again is like not helpful because all I can do is ask and people can say no. And then and also I've noticed some like really big people or whatever will log in and do podcasts remotely and they have like the worst setup. Like, because in my head I'm like, they'll be judging me that I'm not going to have an amazing studio and whatever.
Yeah.
But it's like not at all really. It's like we're all just figuring out the tech stuff.
Do you do a fair bit of research, or not a fair bit, but do you do research on the people you're reaching out to before you reach out to them, or once they've already kind of agreed to come on?
Yeah, so that I can get very in my head about of like there's someone, again, like I met someone who's quite a like prominent historian, academic person, like quite famous and whatever, and he's written like 14 books. And I was like, and he gave me his card, and again I did that thing of like didn't contact him for like 6 months because I was like, I'm not equipped to contact him yet because I haven't read every single book that he's ever written, even though it's just stupid stuff like that. But so I can get like that, like for this woman I'm talking about, she has written a few books and I'm like, I have to read like everything she's written. But then it's like, okay, that's nice if I do, but I don't, because otherwise I've interviewed people before and then I didn't even know they've written a book, and then it's like, oh, I haven't written it, but maybe their book, it wasn't it. Anyway, so I like to have read someone's book or like listened to interviews. Yeah, that can be helpful if I listen to an interview already and then I learn stuff about them. But I also like it to be quite natural and then they are telling me things for the first time.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So it's fresh for both of you.
Yeah, and it's not like I'm a journalist who's like dug up all this stuff on them. It's just like two people having a conversation. And do you? Yeah, because I don't want it to be like a scripted vibe that I have pre-written questions, because I don't. Yeah. It's always just like free flowing.
Yeah. And then do you think that you feel, are you more nervous about reaching out to them before you hit send on the email or after, when you're waiting for them to reply?
Oh, no, when I'm waiting, I don't care. Like, I totally lose track. It's like I've probably asked so many people. When it's like faint, like I probably have to be more disciplined with asking bigger names, but it can like, because I'll be like, oh no, I haven't read everything, so I'm not going to ask them yet. Instead of just seeing like one thing they wrote and liking it and saying it and emailing them. But I don't care because sometimes I don't have the best contact detail for them. So I'm like, maybe they never got the message, like, don't know. But and then for other people, I'll just it's more like it's just like an open invitation, because I know how vulnerable it is. So it's more just like I put it out there and then people can pick up on it or not. Or maybe they'll pick up on it like months later. Yeah. But for some people, it isn't the right thing. So I'm not, and I don't want that energy that I'm like chasing them to come on, because it's not that type of thing.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. Interesting. So it is more of a, it sounds like you just need to, if you think of someone and you want to speak to them, you just need to hit send like straight away before you overthink it.
Yeah, or before I like forget or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you speak to them much on Twitter, if they've got a Twitter, before you get them on? Because I know that's one thing that I've noticed. Well, since you started the podcast and podcasting, is you've built quite the following on Twitter now. You tell me a bit about that.
It's not. You know, I've been using that growth strategy that Paul Graham. Oh, Paul Graham, by the way, has like replied to me the other day. Oh yeah, I sent you that.
Yeah.
But I've been using his growth strategy that he uses at the Y Combinator. That like 5% a week, and I'm just like, okay, grow 5% a week. But I kind of felt, yeah. It's so funny. Was I telling you that I posted the photo being like, I'm going on a date, and then like 70
Yeah.
me, and it made up for like all the growth I'd missed when I was at home because I was so busy. Because it's like you actually have to spend half an hour a day like commenting on other people.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to know how to grow on Twitter, literally simple formula, you just comment on other people. Writing something like interesting. And actually, sorry, the quickest growth strategy is probably to be like super controversial and just write really divisive stuff, and then you'll probably grow.
Yeah.
People hating on you and, you know, whatever. But if you don't want to do that strategy, this one works.
And do you put a lot of thought into what you're commenting on, or like do you just see something pop up on your feed and it's just the first thing that comes to your head? How do you?
Yeah.
What's your plan or what's your strategy?
No, I don't spend, because it's like, I'll try and be like, okay, go on there for half an hour, because you can just end up being a consumer, right? And then like, but to do the strategy, it's like, okay, go on for 30 minutes and just find stuff to comment on, and it will just be like quick. But a lot of mine is when people are sharing pain. I feel like I'm just drawn to that when people are sharing like pain or something, and I'll just write. So I was just thinking, okay, for the audience, Neil's baby's in the background. Toddler now.
Yeah, sorry.
But I was just thinking, because I'm paused, but Riverside now has this AI tool where it just cuts out all the pauses.
Oh, really? Cool.
But then I don't know, because I was kind of resistant to that, because I wanted, it was like unedited conversations to show like how conversations actually flow.
Yeah, but in
this one, I feel like because I'm starting so much, I can just embrace that.
Sorry. So how do you just say? Do you say pause and then we get back to it?
No, like if we stop speaking, it will just cut out the silence.
Ah, clever. And
maybe even the non-words. I can't remember if it does that. It definitely cuts out pauses. It might be a different software that cuts out your ums and ahs.
So you've been drawn to people. What did you say? What draws you?
People sharing vulnerability. I'm kind of drawn. I just end up sending a lot of love hearts or like either broken hearts, love hearts, or like the wounded heart. Like if someone's sharing something painful, and I'll be like the wounded, or that also is a joke if someone's making a joke, and then I'll be like, I basically send a lot of emojis.
Does that help? And does that help you grow?
I don't know, because I'm not paying too much attention. It's more just like you put out a ton. There's probably like more sophisticated ways to do this, but this is just a way that like definitely works. Like if you just go for like half an hour, just commenting on unique accounts, though. It can't be like the same accounts. You've got to find like a unique account. This makes me sound, I don't want, if I'm like have commented on your stuff on Twitter, it is because like I care and I wanted to comment. I'm not just like a robot. So I am just doing stuff I'm drawn to. I don't know, because this gets into the like manipulative stuff that we talked about with like how to win friends and influence people. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. And that other book as well.
Huh?
The other book, that the reciprocal one.
Oh yeah, the reciprocity.
Yeah.
Rule of reciprocity.
Yeah.
But I think it's quite good. So it's more just to get people to click on my profile, and then people will click on it, and my pinned tweet says something like, where are the calm, measured people who are interested in like having debate or having conversations about, I don't know, something like that. and then those people are drawn to it. So I think it's more like a funnel. It's like, okay, you have to build distribution somehow, right? It's like this podcast, how are people ever going to find it in the sea of like millions of things? And it's like you have to build distribution. If you have an audience, that's one way to do it. And then it's like, how do you build an audience? Like, and you can look at like any person, how anyone has an audience. I don't know. It's like a whole thing. And there's different ways to do it, but I think it is like you just have to do something that's authentic to you. And I am just like doing it because otherwise you wouldn't do it. And I have so much fun on it. And now I've made friends. Like I love, it's such a good feeling to open the app because it's like, yay. And like I have the same people who would comment on like I'm in that phase now of Twitter, how it's like shower thoughts or whatever, you know, people just writing meaningless stuff. And I will just write like meaningless stuff about like eggs and bacon for dinner, thoughts. And then like people will like, and then like I just have these people that like comment on everything I do. And it's like, oh, this is so nice. Like, yay. And it's like positive feelings.
That's classic. Because did you think when you first started posting on Twitter, was it a bit like when you first started the podcast reaching out to people? Did you have any fear behind putting your thoughts out there for everyone in the public to see?
Oh, yeah. I more had fears of like, how does this work? This is a new place. I don't know the rules. You feel like you're riding into the ether, into the void or whatever. Also, it's not like I have like 860 followers or something. It's not like I have thousands, but it's like I've built that. I think I've had Twitter for like years and never used it. So I had like 100 followers. And then so I've just grown that systematically by following it. Anyway, but so much good has come from it. Yeah, because I've met so many interesting people. It is like, and people who I read their books or whatever, like authors. And yeah, an author sent me his book, like from the publisher. Morgan Housel, who it's like his other book, sold like 5 million copies. I'm like, wow, that's like really cool. So, but yeah, there are people who, it's just like unexpected stuff like that. I'm like, that's so cool to connect with these people. And like,
yeah, absolutely.
People who it's like, I know they're, they have like a big podcast or they have I don't know. It's quite fun.
Yeah. No, interesting.
But then also to practice like self-expression and to be like, can I freely be myself on a new platform? Because yeah, I was so scared of. It was like, no one cares. Like, no one cares about your stuff. I was so bad at sharing it. So I just kept it a secret for ages. Or like people I don't know. I just had that thing of like, you by existing will like upset people. So you should just like not ever do anything.
Yeah. Do you post your podcast to Twitter and to your other social media?
Oh my God, now I feel so self-conscious that we're talking about Twitter. If I post it, because I've started posting like full-length episodes to Twitter.
Really?
Because you can do that. Yeah, you can post, because now they have full video content up to 2 hours.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, now I'm like, it's way more playful now. I'm like, this is so fun. Like I've started posting video podcasts on Spotify, which I'll do. And then it's like, I'm like, okay, I want to go to YouTube. But then YouTube is this whole other algorithm that is like so much work to understand, like how the thumbnails work, how to make people click, how like people, like there are, those big YouTube channels will have like a 5-person team. I mean, they have like one person dedicated to designing thumbnails. Yeah.
Yeah. Because that's what like, you've started. You've got thumbnails for your YouTube because your YouTube pops up. Can we pause for a second?
Yeah.
Pause. Unpause. So one thing, I know we were talking about your YouTube. I want to talk about your YouTube in a bit because I know that that's something that you're working on a lot now, and that you started back in 2021, because one of the other things you said when we first met and you first kind of started on this journey of creating content and wanting to kind of understand more about the world yourself and then tell other people kind of what you'd learned, but you wanted to read 100 books in a year. And I don't know how many books you've read up to date, but what are some of the books, like the books that you found really interesting, and have any of them kind of changed your perception of the world?
Yeah, for sure. I can't think off the top of my head. Well, yeah, so it's just like I love ideas and sharing ideas, and I think that was, but that 100 books thing was so stupid, like, because I was so in that mind. I don't know. That was just a weird thing. Anyway, but now I've found the outlet of like self-expression. So it's like writing the letter every week, the newsletter. I don't want to call it a newsletter because it's like not news. I like want to call it a letter, but it sounds weird. Anyway, I'll come up with something. So writing that newsletter every week is so important to me for like to connect. It's like, because I hear things. Even last week, it was about Coleman Hughes. Do you know Coleman Hughes? He wrote.
Yeah, you sent me that clip. Yeah.
Yeah. So writing about that, because I watched that. So he wrote this book, End of Race Politics, and he was on the View Whoopi Goldberg show. And I watched that clip and it was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, I need to tell people about this. This is so cool. And then, so I have that outlet through the newsletter, and it's like such a cool way to connect with people who even like, I don't know, people in my life who are interested that I'm like exposed to these ideas and they like hearing them as well, but it's just like a channel for them. Anyway, so there's that. But I realized that with books as well. It's like, that's what would happen. Like I'd read a book and it's like, oh my God, this idea is so cool. It's just like that need to like share. I think some people have it. They just like need to share, and other people can just like consume stuff and it just stays internal. But it's also like processing thoughts. Like people do it outside themselves through speech. So it's like I hear ideas and then it's like I need to speak about them to like help process it. And then TikTok's another great outlet for that I'm now doing. But it was like the fear of self-expression because, anyway, there's all that stuff. Because it's just like awkward doing something like that. And you don't know who you're talking to and blah, blah, blah. But in terms of books, yeah, so I would say it's like constantly that I'm exposed to ideas. So most of the time they're from nonfiction books. But it could be from like, yeah, whatever, that Coleman thing, or like from a podcast or something. But it's almost like I share it. It's almost like this needs to like be in the consciousness. Like more people need to know this. And it's like I share it, but then it's kind of like closes that loop for me or something. So then it's hard for me to think off the top of my head because it's almost like absorbed. Like if I went back into the newsletters, it would be like, oh my God, yeah, I was thinking that at this point. And because it kind of goes with the, you know, with the arc of what I'm dealing with in my life. Like if it's like, oh, I'm dealing with, you know, at one point when I was very in depression, and it was very much about like how I was trying to get myself out of depression. But then that stuff, it's almost like absorbed now, and it's changed the way I think and the way I am. And then, which I think, you know, there's a classic one of like Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, which so many people say that's the book that like, that's like stands out in their mind. And there's one line that's like it's like man's last freedom is his, like you can take away everything. So for him being in a concentration camp, but it's like man's last freedom is choosing one's attitude in those circumstances. Like that can never be taken away. So it's like stuff like that. That's like, okay, yeah, that, I don't know, there's lots of things like that it's almost like I have to remind myself of. But then it's like you almost have to constantly revisit, like you know this stuff, but you have to revisit it. And then
what do you mean by revisit it? Do you go and reread the passage in the book or rewatch a clip?
Yeah, or no, like someone else will talk about it and it's like, oh yeah, for example, at the moment this week, I haven't felt anxiety for like 15 months or something. It's been amazing, like totally free from these like spiraling thoughts that used to be quite common for me in a period. And then I had it this week and it was like so frustrating. And then that's almost why it's helpful to share this stuff with other people, because they can echo it back to you. Like you're learning all the stuff together, and then they can echo back what you already knew but you kind of forgot. So it's like now this week I picked up this book, Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach, which I actually started reading in India when we were together. But yeah, because I had this whole bad habit of like starting books because I'd get so excited by the ideas, and then I'd share an idea and then I'd be like, got that out of my system and like move on to another book, which I think is just an ADD, like wanting novelty thing. Anyway, so, but this book, now I've been trying to like finish all these books that I started, with not in a toxic way of like, you have to finish everything you start, but because I am interested in these ideas. It's like a discipline thing. But so now I'm reading that again, and it's like, oh, I know this idea of like acceptance, like welcoming all the feelings that come, like welcoming the anxiety. Like the amount of times I've said this to friends who have been dealing with anxiety and being like, let's just sit with the anxiety. Let's like welcome it. Let's ask it what it wants you to know. Like, let's, because resisting it can just create this internal conflict and escalate things. But then that's what I was doing this week. Like I was resisting myself because it was like, why am I experiencing anxiety again? I don't want to experience this. So I was fighting the anxiety. And then so picking up this book, and it's Radical Acceptance, and it's like saying yes to everything you feel, which is not saying like yes to being abused, but it just means feeling sad. Like say yes, welcome it, welcome the grief. It's that kind of feel you're feeling things, like sit with it, because that, what resists persists, that kind of thing. Like things will pass when you, anyway. So it's like, I know that from, I don't know how many different books or ideas or meditations or whatever.
Yeah.
But then it's like, you forget this stuff and then you pick it up again and you're like, anyway.
You can remind yourself. Yeah. Interesting. So is there one, like, what's the one book that you've read since you've started that you'd say is the most important one to you so far?
Yeah, so it's a book that I read before that 100 book thing.
Yeah.
That I read when I was depressed, the whole work thing happened, which I talk about in another podcast if anyone cares. Obviously people care. I'm not saying that in it. So I mean, if anyone's interested, I care. Okay. After like that whole thing went down with banking and I was like, couldn't work and stuff, and I was like on sick leave, and then I actually life started getting way better. I don't know. I like to say it's this thing of which I feel like a lot of people experience, that you're just kind of like going along and then you hit a rock bottom, and obviously everything's so bad and painful and horrible. But as you get better, it's like you glimpse above the previous average. You're seeing stuff that it's like, whoa, through meditation, psychedelics, all that stuff. But it's like, oh my God, I'm experiencing world as I've never known it. And it's almost like maybe because it's like you went that low that, I don't know.
Yeah.
But, and then you end up being like, I'm so grateful I went through those really hard times, because now my life is like so much rich, because my heart was like ripped open kind of thing. But now it means I get to like see beauty and nature and whatever in all these different ways. But so on the start of that journey, when I read, this is like so cliche, but I feel like I must have told you about this. I read it was a friend who's like very pragmatic and a lawyer and whatever told me to read this book called The Universe Has Your Back, which is like very spiritual woo-woo. And I was like because I was so depressed, it was like, what? The universe has my back? Like, cool, that's so nice. I can't believe someone has my back. Like, because I just felt like shit. So I was like, obviously I want to read a book like that. but then I was like, oh, this is like very woo-woo and this is like very uncomfortable for me because I was not
So
previously. Like I was like,
you weren't into that kind of stuff before?
no.
Interesting.
Or I probably had shadow around it. I reckon I was interested as a child. Like I had like a statue of Mary in my room as a child. Like Mary, the mother of Jesus.
Yeah,
Glow in the
yeah.
dark as well.
Really?
Yeah, so I feel like I've always been like quite kind of spiritual in a way, but obviously there's like shame. I don't know, it's like not cool or something. So I just kind of suppressed it. But no, not really. And I never like meditated or anything, didn't know anything about that stuff. But yeah, and then in that book, she kept talking about Eckhart Tolle, I think, and then someone else. It was one of those things when you just keep hearing about something. And then I picked that book up, A New Earth. A lot of people say like The Power of Now really, but I don't know. I never got through that book, even though it's really short. Because he says like read this slowly, and then it was like I just have read it so slowly that I've never finished it.
You wait, which one? The
Power of Now.
The Power of Now.
But yeah, but the one that had the impact on me was A New Earth. So everything I read in that, I was like, this is true. Like it just felt like truth in, you know, when it's just like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. And it's kind of talking about, it's like saying all the like Buddha, Jesus, like all the different religions, what they are saying is the same thing. And it's almost even like with psychedelics, because that was another thing that had a massive influence on, and also like helping me heal from depression and whatever. I can't remember if we talked about that on this podcast. Anyway, it's that same thing of like signpost, like language can't quite cover this, but it's like signposts to this truth. And I feel like you feel that. Well, but then maybe everyone doesn't feel that. But some people can feel that or get glimpses of it, or through meditation or something, you get glimpses of this feeling of like oneness, of this like truth of what consciousness is or something. Anyway, that book gave me that when it was just like, oh my God. And then so many bits of that of just like labels, like good and bad, like so many bits of that have stuck with me. So it's like labeling good or bad. Those are just labels. Like he has these little anecdotes of, you know, the story of the man with the, you know, the man gets a Ferrari and everyone's like, oh, the man wins a lottery and everyone's like, you're so lucky. And he's like, am I? And then he gets a Ferrari and then it drives it off a cliff or something. And then it's like, oh, you're so unlucky. And then it's like, am I? And then he's in hospital.
Yeah.
But while he's in hospital, his house like falls off a cliff or something. I don't know. But it's just things like that. I don't know, that just seem to make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. So you were able to understand what you were going through when you read the book, or what did it?
It was just like bigger. It was just like part of something bigger. Like I'm stuck in my head, very painful depression. But when depression is very like inward focused, like it's all kind of you and your emotions, and you're stuck internally. So one of the things that I say is like one of the biggest things, because you just feel everything about you, like you are a failure, you are worthless, everything is happening to you, and it's so painful. But you lose perspective of everything and everyone else. So one of the things that can like shift it so quickly is when you talk to someone and then you find out like they have problems as well. Like it's like you forget that there are other. Anyway, but I think it was shifting of like the truth of, because you're stuck you're like fully consumed in this,
Mm.
which is it's so hard and complicated. And this is not like blaming anyone, obviously, and being like, oh, you can just snap out of it. But it's like, for me, this like cut through that to be like, you're part of something so much bigger and you're connected. It's like you're connected to every... I probably need to reread the book and find out what it actually says. But it's like understanding consciousness. It's like we're all connected. Like, what even is consciousness? Where even is it? It's not in your head. Like, you don't know. And it's like the connection with nature, the I don't know, just so many things in it made sense. And then, but maybe it's also because this is now what I can remind myself when I get a bit lost, that of how I am obsessed with truth. Like, I love following truth and like feeling things that it's like, oh, this, because I can feel it like in my body. I'm like, oh my God, this is true and this is good and this is like, this is so cool. And that makes me excited and like lights me up. And then, so that's, for example, like the Coleman Hughes thing. I was like, oh my God, what he's saying is so powerful and so like, it's like truth.
But what do you mean by truth? Like factually true, or it feels true to you?
It's like that person is saying something. And that's probably why I do the podcast, because people are coming, and that actually, this is just making sense to me now. This is why I'm like not so interested in someone's like opinions or whatever is happening, or like the current stuff, but I'm interested in their truth. So they are telling me their experience, and this is why it's also very important, like, that it's the right people come on the podcast, because not everyone's capable of this, right? Because it's too scary for some people. But so for everyone that's coming on, they are saying the truth of their experience. So, and it's like, that's what's so special to me. And then I can feel it. Like, it's weird because I just end up like emotional in a lot of the episodes. Like, they're just saying something, like they, you know, something's happening and then their mum said something to them. And then I'll just be like, oh, like, I just feel it. Like, that's something that had such an impact on them, whatever, that then they're saying that in this conversation. And it's like, that's what I find really cool. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like, that's their truth, versus talking about like, oh, what do you think about this? And I don't know, maybe that's...
Have you ever had someone on and their truth is something that you strongly disagree with?
No. Oh, well, like having someone on, like Kai, who came on recently, who's from Finland, and he was injecting amphetamines and started abusing drugs. Obviously, I'm not like, oh yeah, that's a great way to like deal with the problems in your life. Like, but I'm just listening to him. Like, I'm just curious. It's like, what happened? Like, oh, okay, you were bullied, and then okay, you learned how to fight for yourself, so you got into a boxing group, and then you got in with this bad group, and then you started drinking, and then you started doing drugs, and then someone, you know, and then that's how it escalated. Like, it's not like it doesn't matter what my views on anything are, right? I'm just listening to to understand that. And also for some, I mean, he has a big podcast and talks a lot about that, so maybe less so for him, but for a lot of people, they are figuring stuff out in real time as well, because if they've never talked about it, and then you're both kind of, but sometimes I might say like a different view, like they might, especially because it could be a vulnerable thing, and if they're like, oh yeah, maybe it was just my mom didn't care about me or something. I don't know if anyone's ever said that, and then I'll be like, oh, maybe it was that she was just so stressed because of the, like, but I'm not going to tell them what it is because I don't know their mum, but I might suggest like, oh, maybe could it have been this? And then, do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like we stay away from I can't think of an episode where someone started talking about stuff that is getting into. Someone might make a random comment, and then I'll just be like, yeah, we don't care about your opinion on inflation or something. But it's also just like not the point of the podcast.
Yeah. Okay. And then when you read Eckhart Tolle or Tolle?
I don't know. Tolle, maybe.
So you read him, and then was it at about the same time when you started using psychedelics to help treat your depression, or what's the backstory to that?
That would have been a year later. That was, I just told this story how random is this? At a Snap event, Snapchat? Was I telling you this?
I heard you went to a Snapchat, yeah.
Their offices, and they have this thing where you sit around in a circle and you tell a story. And I ended, because it was like, what was the time you had this like profound connection with nature? And it was this story.
That's a really funny, that's a really interesting thing for Snapchat to do, when everyone who uses their thing is like disconnected from the world around them when they're using the app.
Yeah. Okay, I signed an NDA. Maybe I'm not meant to talk about it. I signed an NDA to go into the building. I was like, this is like a bit intense. Wow. Like not even banks make you do
That's
this.
so interesting. Is it because everyone walking around actually does have the dog filter like in real life on their face?
Yeah. I mean, I can't answer that.
Just on that, why the dog filter became so popular?
I didn't know.
It didn't just add the ears and the tongue, but it also made you look slimmer. So when people would take a selfie, they were like, "Oh, I actually look really good," and it's because it was slimming you down.
Classic.
Sire.
No, psychedelics was my ex-boyfriend had mentioned that he was like, after we'd broken up, but we were friends, and he'd mentioned he was going to like go to the countryside and do like mushrooms by himself. And I was like, what? Can you, like, is that a thing? Like, should you do that by yourself or whatever? And then I think, I don't know, I feel like it's one of those things you're like called to do. I can't remember how it happened, but I just felt, I think I must have asked him, like, I don't know if I'd heard it helps for depression or something. And then I asked him, and then he got some sent over from the US, like proper grown ones. I hope this isn't too incriminating. Once I ordered them online from Amsterdam, and the Home Office seized them and wrote me a letter, and they were like, apparently it's like 99% of the time they get through, no issue. Anyway, whatever. He posted them, and so we got them, and I wanted to do it, and wanted to do it like with someone who had experience doing them, and it was in lockdown, and then I watched like so many documentaries and whatever, like learnt everything there is to know, and then I was doing it in like a very like did a ritual around it, and like I like blended them into a green juice. I feel like I did that when we did them as well. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, I think so.
And it was like, I was like, set an intention and all that, and had like all the like sugar, like brought like sugary drinks because they can like snap you out of it or whatever. Anyway, and then, it was just so, but I feel like I didn't do it as part of like a protocol or something as people do now with like microdosing or ketamine or whatever. I just more did like a full trip. But interestingly, because I was on SSRIs, antidepressants, they lower the effects.
Really?
Yeah. So the first time I did it without them, was the first time I had visual effects, like, and that was really cool. Because yeah.
Interesting.
Anyway, but I would do them like 6 months apart. Like I'd just do it when I felt called to do it. Like
Yeah.
it wasn't like, and then I told the psychiatrist at the time. And he was and I was scared to say it and whatever. And he was actually he was so empowering of me, like reading all these books and being like, this stuff's helping me. And he was like, that's amazing. Like bibliotherapy, you like learning, because with depression, it's like whatever works. If you're suddenly not depressed, it's like, great. Like if standing on your head, someone says that, like if standing on your head makes you not depressed, it's like, cool, you solved it. So it's like, so he was like, reading books and stuff is great. Like therapy seems to really help you. And then with psychedelics, he was like, he was going to Imperial London to learn about all the latest research. And he was like very interested to find out how it helped me. And yeah, so that was great because I was worried that I would be told off or like, just stick to like mainstream medicine type approaches. Anyway, and now it is being like stuff's happening really quickly in terms of treating these things. But yeah, that was so cool. Like that helped so much. And that the story I was telling you, because it's like processing death stuff as well. I mean, that's like a whole nother thing.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, interesting. And is it something that you still do now every 6 months? Or is it something that's like do you feel like you need to keep exploring with them, or I don't know, is it still part of your journey?
Yeah, interesting. I haven't done them for nearly 2 years, I think. And actually I started thinking about it. I have this oil, like I paid quite a lot of money to have this oil. It's like a different thing. I don't know whether it would still work because, anyway, other mushrooms like lose their potency. Yeah, anyway, so I don't know if this oil will still work. So I don't know, but I have been feeling like, because I had that anxiety last week, that's interesting you ask because it's come up a couple of times that it's like, oh, maybe I am feeling the calling again to do it. So let's see. But yeah, it's one of those annoying things that it's like, I don't know if the oil work. Maybe I should just have a little bit as like a microdose and see if it does anything, to see if it still works. Because it's like 2 years old.
Interesting.
If anyone's listening and knows, please let me know. It hasn't been in the fridge because the guy said don't put it in the fridge because it crystallizes. But other ones you should put in the fridge. They makes them last longer.
Interesting. So Eckhart Tolle and magic mushrooms, both pivotal. But it's not to say that the other books that you've read and the other experiences you've had haven't also been really important. It's just that
those were probably the first 2 steps. And then the last ingredient was IFS, which I'm obsessed with. Internal Family Systems, which has like changed so much. And we have talked about it extensively on this podcast. I think a couple of episodes ago, I talked about that with Alex. If anyone wants to listen, but yeah, because I think because even in India, like I was still not in a good place, and then because I just had a breakup as well, but even up until before I went back to work at a hedge fund last year, that week before starting, I can't remember because I was in Australia for like a month. And I was like pretty depressed. I'm talking about it on this podcast, actually, the episode with Tom McDonald. He's asking me like, oh, why do you think you're depressed? Like, maybe what happens if you change your diet? Which I feel like, anyway, could probably optimize that a bit better and not eat so many Easter eggs. Anyway, not that I'm eating Easter eggs every day. It is Easter. But anyway, but then that week before I started work, that was like so bad. Like I was waking up every day being like, I do not want to exist. Like those really bad, dark thoughts. And IFS is relieved that part, because that's like a part of me that was suffering so much. And IFS, like you view yourself as a system of parts. So now with me being like the anxiety, that is a part of me that's trying to protect me, that's like creating all these stories, but it's trying to protect a more vulnerable part that feels like, and the vulnerable part feels like there's something wrong with me or something. So it's trying to protect me from pain or whatever. Anyway, so this part that was in a lot of pain, this suicidal part was trying to protect me from a part that was in a lot of pain. So that part's being like, okay, this is so painful, like here's an option like that everyone has. But knowing, so through IFS, like, because other approaches might just be like, okay, that means you're depressed, like take medication and just numb that, or like, I don't know, or like let's like talk therapy, or like talk about it. But it wasn't unburdening that core wound, whereas IFS, that was like the massive shift, because it's like that is a part of you that's trying to protect you. Let's find out if we can access the part beneath that that's like in a lot of pain, and then we access the part that's in a lot of pain, and like, you know, that's where all that stuff is, like giving all, like, not, you know, self-love or whatever can be a bit hard for people, but it's like self-acceptance. It's like welcoming that part and finding out what the burden is, like finding out what the pain is, finding out what the memory is, like what happened to make it feel like these really painful. And it's under hypnosis. I don't know. It's all a bit abstract. I remember we were in Greece together and I was listening to the audio and I like could not stop. I was like, so that's another example of a book when I was like, oh my God, this is like truth in my body. Like everything I'm hearing, this is like so real. Like this is something that makes sense. I feel like that's what I mean by truth. It's like something that is like, it just makes so much sense. It's so clear. It's like clarity. It's like, this is the thing.
Yeah.
I also had it with Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg, that book as well. I'm like, oh my God, this is like life-changing, and like everyone needs to read this. But then,
what's that about? What's that about?
It's about, so Nonviolent Communication. Oh my God, it's so cool. I feel like I need to do a course. They have courses. I'm so sad. He would be the number one person I would get on this podcast if he was still alive. He sadly died. But it's basically like we all have needs, and so using communication to express our needs, but in a way that doesn't create like more conflict. So there's a very like careful way that you have to do it. And he uses examples. So he was like in, you know, Israel, Palestine, having these conversations, and in schools dealing with like bullies, or like in a home dealing with like a mum and a child who's leaving the socks on the ground. So like it's so the way you communicate is how you feel. I think it's like feeling, observation, and then need and request. So for example, like the mum with the socks on the ground, it's like, if the mum's just like, stop leaving your socks on the ground, like you're so, especially if it's like, oh, you're so lazy or something, like you've just insulted the person. So, or if it's like, you know, you always do this, or like you're always a mess, or like you don't even care about me or something. Like those are all stories that can escalate things. Whereas the effective way to do it is to say like, the observation, like what's happening. So it's like when I see, like when I've noticed that you left your socks on the ground, I feel stressed or whatever it is. He has a whole list of words that's so helpful that actually helps you tap into how you feel. So it's like, I feel stressed, and then your need. So I have a need for order in the shared spaces that we, like the spaces we share together. I have a need for order, and then a request. Would it be okay if you please took them upstairs? Like, and then it can't be coercion, so it has to be a request, so they can say no, and then you can like negotiate. But so it can't be like, you have to do this, even with children, because they just won't respond to that. And so, for example, he uses it in, it also teaches you how to like deal with someone else when they're saying a lot of things, like they're really upset. It's you tapping into, okay, what are their needs and what are they feeling? What am I hearing? So like he has an example of, he went to, the Middle East and was like talking to these Palestinians, and he got up to speak, and one of them just said like, you're like a horrible American or something. And then he noticed that some of the weapons or something had branded "Made in the USA" on them. And then he was like, oh, am I understanding? Like, you just have to ask questions. It's like, oh, are you feeling upset because like the conflict here is, you're connecting that to where I'm from or whatever. Like, you just have to keep, anyway, it's like by asking these questions of like, oh, am I understanding that you have a need to feel heard because of X, Y, and Z, or whatever it is. And then the person is just, you're hearing what they're saying. So they're like, yeah, they're like, yes, that is the thing. Like, yes. And then it ends up like he goes to that guy's house for Ramadan dinner kind of thing. You know, it's like it escalates quick. Like, it's crazy, the example. It's so cool. So there's another girl, there's an example of someone who's like at a shelter, and then someone comes and like wants a room, like an addict. And then she's like, I'm so sorry, we're full. And then he has her on the ground and like has a knife to her throat.
Wait, the author?
No, like because he ran workshop.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So like one of his participants. And then she uses the technique and she's like, okay, I sense that you're feeling upset because you need somewhere to stay tonight. Like, instead, because the natural reaction is just to defend yourself and be like, I don't have, or, he has an example with bullies, like that he's talking to a room of kids, and then there's like the cool, like bad boys, whatever, he's like, okay, everyone, like, could you please come down? Like, it has to be a request. And then they're like, no, they're like ignoring him in the corner. And he's like, it's very important that people understand it's a request, not a demand.
Yeah.
So he says to them like, oh, can I ask you, like, what did I say? And they're like, you said we have to come and sit down there. And he's like, oh, no, I actually just asked whether you would, like, if you wanted to, whatever, makes it like a request to make sure. Because people are very sensitive to being coerced.
Yeah.
Like, people need to feel like they're doing it of their own free will. Anyway, I'm just like, that is the book that I always say, like, if I was in charge of the world, I would make everyone read it, like, once a year.
Wow. Interesting. Very interesting. So what's that called? Nonviolent communication.
He has...
Yeah.
There are, like, you can listen to podcasts, like, on Spotify or whatever. Like, they'll have segments of him teaching the techniques. It's so cool. Like, there's one, for example, where it's like this woman, he was dealing with this woman who was so annoying, who would never stop talking. Maybe that's me right now. And he's like, can I ask you, like, one of the, we all know those people who never stop talking, and it's like, it doesn't even matter if you're there. Like, they are just like going on and on and on. And he said to her, and it's like really annoying for him, he was like trying to read his book or something. And he said to her, what is the need you have right now by you? Like, what do you actually need from me? Because you're just saying this stuff on and on. And then I can't remember how they resolved that one. But she basically realizes like she doesn't even know what her need is. She doesn't even know why she's speaking. She's just like speaking. And he's like, I don't know. And then she like has self-awareness. But it's like obviously that's a very awkward thing to tell. You know, you can't just go to someone like, you're so annoying.
Yeah.
Like, stop speaking, because that's offensive. But it's the way it's so about using language and using I language. So, you know, it's very important to say, I feel upset, and not you made me feel upset. Like, you did this that made me feel like this. It's like, no, like, I feel sad. Because no one can say, no, you don't. It's like, no, I'm telling you how I feel. Like, only I know how I feel.
Yeah.
And it's not blame. I'm not saying you did anything, but I'm saying I have a need to feel whatever it is. And then you make the request and they can say no.
I'll have to check it out, and I'm sure that, have you spoken about it before on the pod?
I feel like I spoke about it to someone, which I feel a bit bad. No, I mean, it was fine. I spoke about it recently. Someone was saying a situation with their dad, and they were like, yeah, Dad, like, you don't care about me, and you this and this and this. And I was like, oh, have you heard of nonviolent communication? Because I was saying like, oh, the way you're communicating isn't. Anyway, it was fine.
Yeah.
And he had, it's so much practice, because naturally we just fall into the thing of, especially with people who we love and who we can kind of take for granted, how, you know, that we know they're always going to be there. So you can kind of just communicate however you want. But it's like, it just makes your life way easier if you know how to get the message across. And then it's like, it creates intimacy, because then you get to a better place in your relationship. Oh my God, like, imagine if it's like, if everyone was trained this with dealing with like these massive conflicts in the world. It's like, you don't have to kill each other. Find out what the needs are. I mean, it's obviously a very idealistic way to think, but
no, it's all it's really interesting to hear, that since you've started this, you've come across all of these different things, and they've made such a profound impact on your life. It's cool that you know, like, you've been able to say this happened then, and then this happened. It's been really interesting.
And I'm like, yeah, the world can be so much better. It's so exciting.
I guess the last question is, so you said if you ruled the world, you would make everyone read that book.
No, I'd request.
Oh, you'd request.
This is what I said to your friend, Vanya, because he talked about nonviolent communication on a TikTok. And I was like, oh my God. He talked about IFS and nonviolent communication. I was like, oh my God. And then I said that to him. I was like, that's the book, like, I would make everyone read. But then I was like, no, that's not on point for nonviolent communication. It's like a request.
You would request everyone to read it. Oh, well, is there anything else you'd like to tell the listeners, or what's the plan for the rest of the year?
Well, the plan is like to figure out, I feel, because you were like, oh yeah, you've been focusing on YouTube, mate. The YouTube is like a bit like all over the place. Like, I need to get that together. But yeah, I'm going to keep, like, I'm loving Twitter. I'm really enjoying making TikToks to practice communicating, and then putting clips from this stuff on there, which is fun. And I am going to get over these things. This was actually helpful to hear myself talk about these fears, because it's like, yeah, that's like what I owe to the audience, to go and get like the best possible guests on. for them to hear and not be in my head about like, oh, because it's like not about me. Who cares? Just the fear of whatever. And what else? I feel so awkward talking about all this stuff. But then I feel like it's good for me to do this. Because I have a lot of compassion for my guests. Because it is so awkward. Like, you just say this stuff and then you're like, what did I even say? It's so cringe. But then it's like, cool, you're allowed to learn and grow. And that's good that in 6 months from now, you'll be like, oh, I know so much more than that. And I wouldn't have said it like that. But it's like, oh, that's nice that I don't know. I feel like do you ever have that you feel, because I remember once there was a school of life thing that was like, if you're not embarrassed by who you were last year, you haven't learned enough or something. And you were like,
Okay.
but you don't have to be embarrassed. Which I agree with, because it's like you can just be compassionate to yourself. But are you ever like, oh, cringe, like what I said 2 years ago?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, 100%. I wish I'd stood my ground more on the cancelled podcast.
I feel like you stood your ground too much.
No way. But yeah, I keep saying apologies, but thank you very much for the interview, and it's been great to see you grow on this journey.
Thanks. Oh, the other thing I want to do is get an intro. Sorry.
Oh yeah. Get an intro with a song.
Yeah, with a song, with a cool little intro.
What song would you choose?
And a better closing thing. Because I find that stuff so awkward. Being like and subscribe or whatever. But I need to go.
You have to, don't you? Like it. You have to say like and subscribe.
Or just, remind people, Well, no, I think that's a YouTube thing, but for podcasts, it's like, if you enjoy this episode, share it with someone or subscribe for more content. Oh, no, rating. It's like, leave a rating.
Leave a rating, yeah. Well, everyone who's listening, please leave a positive rating. I request you to.
Negative if you didn't like it. You're free to choose. All right, good chat.
All right, good chat.
Bye.
Bye.